PM on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Brits are kind-hearted and welcoming, but we've had enough of forking out £2 billion for illegal migrants. That's the verdict of Superwoman Suella Braverman. But as the Home Secretary stands firm on her Channel crisis crusade, is Prime Minister Rishi Sunak undermining her message by putting the protection of the British coast in the hands of the French?
I think there is an opportunity for us to work closely, not just with the French, but with other countries as well.
So I'll react to the PM's COP26 tete-a-tete with Macron in my digest next, before I get the verdicts of my superstar panel. Star Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Plus, should the UK take inspiration from Australia's no-nonsense tactics that ended their migrant crisis practically overnight? Former Aussie Foreign Minister Alexander Downer unveils his battle plan for Braverman at 9:55. Where, at today's Doomsday COP27 summit, Sunak faced his first major test as PM on the world stage and signalled that more of our towards green agenda. But should the government really be entertaining calls from Red Ed Miliband, climate change reparations?
Would a Labour government pay reparations to developing countries for climate change?
So this is about global solidarity. I mean, yes, we have some historical responsibility, but this is about global solidarity, and it's absolutely...
That's our big debate at 10 p.m. Meanwhile, Rishi's political nemesis and rival Boris Johnson had this to say about critics of eco-extremism.
Some of the naysayers to adopt a corrosive cynicism about net zero.
But are concerns of financial ruin in the name of net zero being swept under the rug? Neil Oliver reacts to Bojo's speech and explains why COP27 is more like Con27. He's tonight's Outsider at 9:50. Plus, after Just Stop Oil will bring the M25 to a standstill despite police being tipped off to their latest chaotic scheme.
I hate you for doing this, and you're entitled to hate me. But I wish you would direct all that anger and hatred at our government.
No, I'm going to take it out on you, actually. So does more need to be done to stop eco-terrorism? That and more of today's top headlines in the media buzz at 10:30. And as a shock new poll reveals the disgust of 18 to 24-year-olds, should younger generations take more pride in our greatest ever Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, defending the honour of the man who steered us through our darkest hour, the former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe. She'll go to war with broadcaster and Imam Ajmal Masroor in the clash at 9:25. I'll get your verdict too. And from our greatest ever PM to the other end of the spectrum, arguably, the man who chronicled the rapid rise and even swifter fall of Liz Truss in a bombshell new book, The Spectator's James Heal, reveals where it all went wrong for the 50-day PM. He's live at 10:20. As he cracks down on imposter Twitter accounts launched by lefty losers like Trump-hating comic Kathy Griffin, does Elon Musk need to rise above his deranged critics to prove he's serious about free speech? Well, Mick Hume, who is a free speech champion, uncancelled on this fascinating viewpoint at 10:45. We'll have tomorrow's newspaper front pages on the way as per usual, and I'll crown the first greatest Briton and Union jackass of the week at 10:50. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though, and Boris Johnson today had a slightly odd explanation for why Westminster went mad this summer and deposed a Prime Minister elected in a landslide. The wild weather. Watch.
Temperatures in London this July reached 40 degrees, which is unprecedented and almost unbearable by United Kingdom standards, perhaps even contributing, who knows, to unexpected political turmoil that we saw in Westminster at that time.
Well, I think darker forces, stormier forces, you might say, were at play, Boris, but it is a theory nonetheless. My digest on why Rishi Sunak must not rely on the French to solve the illegal migrant emergency coming up. Then my superstar panel weigh-in. Esteemed Daily Express columnist Carol Malone is here alongside the Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. But before all of that, the news headlines at 9 with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Dan. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has said climate security goes hand in hand with energy security, adding the UK is tripling its funding to help nations adapt to the impacts of climate change. Rishi Sunak has been addressing world leaders at the COP27 summit after holding bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron. The two sides have agreed to work on tackling illegal immigration and to collaborate further on the transition to clean energy, including on civil nuclear power.
Climate security goes hand in hand with energy security. Putin's abhorrent war in Ukraine and rising energy prices across the world are not a reason to go slow on climate change. They are a reason to act faster.
The COP27 summit has also been told the world's action on climate change is either a collective solidarity or collective suicide pact. The UN Secretary-General says countries need a clear finance roadmap to prevent irreversible climate chaos. Antonio Guterres is calling for a universal early warning system within the next 5 years and for all governments to impose a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies. A £250 million plan to replace the national flagship, Royal Yacht Britannia, has been scrapped as part of cuts to government spending. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson championed the scheme when he was in charge, but faced criticism from MPs who feel there are other priorities for military spending. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace told the Commons he's prioritising the procurement of a multi-purpose surveillance vessel over the flagship. A service has been held to mark the opening of the Royal British Legion's Field of Remembrance. The field at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire pays tribute to those who have lost their lives in conflict from World War I to the present day. It will be open to the public to pay their respects until the end of the month. The Prince of Wales has opened up about mental health. In a conversation with footballers Harry Kane and Declan Rice, Prince William said the game has taught him that disappointment is a part of life. The trio shared their fondest football memories during a podcast ahead of the World Cup, which begins in under a fortnight. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
The Manston Asylum Processing Centre in Kent as woke left-wing protesters were demanding that illegal migrants smuggled by human trafficking gangs across the Channel should be housed at the expense of cash-strapped British taxpayers.
Refugees are welcome here. Refugees are welcome here. Refugees are welcome here. Refugees are welcome here.
Do you know, if I was there, I'd actually love to know. I'd ask every one of those protesters whether they are willing to lead by example and take one of the illegal migrants into their own homes, given we know thousands are brought to this country with the sole aim of entering crime rings focused on prostitution, drugs and even terrorism. Meanwhile, the weak response by the UK means the inhumane people smugglers continue to feel emboldened as they ship more illegal economic migrants from Albania into the country on a daily basis. So the Sun revealed today one Albanian gang has launched an £11,000 per person package that guarantees a 40-minute speedboat ride from Belgium with no risk of being incarcerated on arrival, with access to lawyers to help them avoid the camps or fast-track deportation, being all part of the offer. Now, that sick service is again being advertised on the Chinese social networking app TikTok.
Departure from France to the UK, £3,500 by dinghy. Departure from Europe to UK with documents and with a friend, £15,000. Route from Spain to England for only £6,000, 100% guaranteed.
And the bill for the catastrophic failure to control our borders continues to stack up too, with the Times revealing more than £3.7 million has been spent this past year on taxis, minivans and buses for asylum seekers, illegal migrants and unaccompanied minors. That, of course, adds to the £7 million a day being spent on accommodation, including many 4- and 5-star hotels. Now, of course, you know, I have been describing this situation as a national emergency for well over a year here on GB News. The solutions are obvious, and they include turning back the boats and supercharging the Rwanda scheme, which will likely only be achieved if we leave the ECHR. But today, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, once again incorrectly put his faith in the French, misunderstanding that the worse this situation gets for the UK, the better this is for the anti-Brexit Macron. So emerging from his meeting with the French president at COP27, Sunak made it clear he hasn't found a solution.
I think there is an opportunity for us to work closely, but not just with the French, but with other countries as well. But I'm actually leaving this with renewed confidence and optimism that working together with our European partners, we can make a difference, grip this challenge of illegal migration and stop people coming illegally. Look, we all want this situation to resolve itself as quickly as possible. I also want to be honest with people that it's a complex issue. It's not one simple solution that's going to solve it overnight. I wouldn't be being honest if I said that there was.
I am not reassured by his words, and that is why I once again implore Sunak to throw his weight behind the Home Secretary, Superwoman Suella Braverman, who I believe is the only cabinet minister with the bold vision to solve this crisis if, and it's a big if she is given the support to do so. As Suella wrote in the Mail on Sunday yesterday, it is not right that the British people are picking up a £2 billion bill every year because the asylum system has been broken by an unprecedented wave of illegal migration. We need to overcome all legal obstacles and get our Rwanda partnership working. We are defending it vigorously in the courts. If illegal migrants know that if they cross the channel, they will be swiftly transported to Rwanda or any other country we make an agreement with, the incentive to jump the queue will fall away. Many Albanians spuriously claim to be victims of modern slavery, despite paying thousands to come here. This is an abuse of our system that must stop. We must also wean ourselves off the use of expensive hotels. Britain is a generous and kind country. We always treat everyone in a humane way. But people who come here illegally from safe countries are not welcome and should not expect to stay. To respond now, my superstar panel. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson, and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Carol Malone, look, I know we have to meet with the French. I understand that. But this is not the solution. Macron is not going to provide us with
We've been, quotes, working with the French for many years now, and we've paid them many millions of pounds. And how many photographs have we seen of French police officers on the beach having a fag while boats are carried past them?
They just seem to watch them, don't they?
We're told that the French have stopped 29,000 crossings this year. We're told that they've stopped 1,000, they've captured 1,000 boats. How do we know that's true? We don't know if it's true. The idea that Macron is going to help us with this crisis just doesn't ring true. I mean, I saw the way they greeted each other today, and it looked very friendly, but he doesn't really like Britain. So, why I should like Sunak, I don't know.
I mean, he'll certainly prefer Sunak to Truss, though.
Well, absolutely, and certainly to Boris. But it's interesting, we were talking about what we have to do. The problem in this country shouldn't be housing them. It's stopping them landing here. We have to turn back the boats. We have to stop using the RNLI and Border Force as a taxi service. We've got to make them think they're not going to land. Australia back in 2012 did this, and they got absolutely slaughtered by the UN. They got told they were hideously cruel, whatever. But, you know, they went from 25,000 crossings between 2012 and 13, 2014, 159 crossings. So they stopped 97% of
and ended up zero. Ended up a big fat zero within 2 years. And actually, we've got Alexander Downer here soon, the former Australian Foreign Minister, to talk about how they did it. But the problem is, Carol, they weren't in the ECHR, and that is what's going to stop us.
But they still got worldwide criticism. But all they said at the time was, people have to be aware you will not set foot on Australian soil. So what they did, they had a deal back then with Papua New Guinea, and it was somewhere.
Nauru,
Nauru, I don't know where that is, but yeah, I read that today.
It's a small little island.
Okay, so they had deals with them, but no one got onto Australian soil. But you know, I'm not entirely sure there's the will for that in this country. I can't see our government
there's
ever
not the political
doing that
will,
in a million years.
but my God, there's the will from the people, Belinda. I mean, Belinda, how did you feel when you saw those protesters outside the Manston asylum processing plant over the weekend? Would they be happy to have the 40,000 illegal migrants in their community? Would they be happy to house one?
No, it's this insane sort of fantasy belief, especially coming from the left. Believe these people when they say who they are who they are. No, they're not. They don't have any documents. I'm sure some are genuinely poor and distraught people that we need to help. But, well, then give to charities in their own countries. Why are they in our country? This is a big problem for us because, unfortunately, the EU loves mass immigration. It weakens the nation state and democracy. They love that the EU flag is what they lean to instead of the national flag. So Macron is not the man that's going to protect this country. And also, it's not his responsibility. How dare Rishi stand up there and go, oh, it's complex and, oh, we're working on it. The Tories have been saying that for years, and it's not complex. If you step foot on this land from those boats, you get sent back immediately. And
sent back where?
Well, you get. I'm sorry, but the Navy
Albania,
needs to
for a start, taken straight back. You know, any Albanian who lands on our soil should be put on a plane.
I mean,
they have no right.
What's the problem with turning back the boats? They have come from France, a first world country. That's the first thing. Everyone crossing the channel, they're already in France.
Why are we blaming
And as
France?
Carol says, the vast majority are Albanian. Now, Albania is a NATO
Well, no, not the vast majority. A lot are Albanians, I agree.
membership.
But you constantly turn the boats back to France. Why is it France's responsibility more than ours? On the basis that these people travelled through France to get to Calais to come here.
In France. They are in France.
Yes, but they came from somewhere else before that. So if you're an Afghan, or if you're a Syrian, or an Iraqi, or an Iranian, you would have had to pass through other countries before you got to France.
Most of them pass through 4 or 5 safe countries before they get to France.
So it's not France's problem any more than it's our problem.
But if you were a refugee, you would not pass through 4 or 5 safe countries. If you were a genuine refugee, they're just doing that to get to...
But I tell you,
That economic migrants
I'll tell you
on
where
the whole.
Macron is right, because he blamed the UK for this migrant crisis, and I agree with him. He said the UK's dependency on illegal labour is what is drawing all these people in and is what is making the Home Office sign through every Tom, Dick and Harry with no documents, as if they're asylum seekers. The black economy in this country is worth between 150 and 200 billion pounds.
And that's where...
This is why they're letting them all in. And
that's
Macron
where the
was right.
Albanian...
We dangle the carrot. We allow most asylum seekers...
Do you concede, from a left-wing point of view, that our country, in the current state that we are facing economically, with the state the NHS is in, with the state that our housing system is in, we simply cannot cope with 40,000 illegal migrants a year? Actually, it's going to be 50,000.
They're not illegal.
We cannot cope.
Let's get the language right. But they're only illegal migrants if they disappear once they get here.
They are illegally here. The vast majority are illegal migrants, and I don't have a...
No, they're not. If they're asylum seekers, they have a legitimate right to come here and claim asylum. And the problem...
Are asylum seekers?
Pardon?
What percentage are asylum seekers?
They're all asylum seekers.
No, the EU Commissioner admitted that the vast majority were economic migrants coming into Europe from North Africa.
You come here to actually claim asylum.
Or
Dan O'Mahony, who is responsible for trying to crack down on this was very clear the vast majority, or at least a large
proportion, are Albanians, and the Albanians...
For a life of crime.
That's right, yes.
So do you want them in your community?
No, and the whole point about Albanians...
What should we do with them?
Albanians should be sent straight back home as soon as we catch them.
And why aren't they? It's not France that's the problem, it's our UK government that's the problem.
No, it's the international law that's the problem, because they can still actually apply for asylum. Asylum is refused, they will be sent back to Albania.
But 74% of people are not sent back ever.
Well,
ever. So there's a problem with the system.
If their asylum claim is genuine and we take them in, of course they don't go back.
But this you've got to admit, this is not an asylum problem anymore. This is an economic migrant problem.
No, but what they're doing is they're claiming asylum. What they're doing is not illegal. It's not illegal to cross the channel.
It is kind of... It is illegal.
No, it's not even kind of. It's not illegal to cross the channel to claim asylum.
If you've come from Albania, a NATO country that is applying for EU membership, it is absolutely illegal to get on a boat from France and enter our country. What is not illegal about that?
Not if you're claiming asylum. And what will happen is... And what will happen is that an Albanian won't get asylum. The damn O'Mahony is right. What they then do is they end up in a hotel and disappear in 2 days. And that's a problem that they must deal with. And a problem of law enforcement.
And they're never going to give anything back to this country.
The new Prime Minister of Italy is fantastic.
Oh, yeah, he did it today.
Yesterday, she did do something straight away. She stopped young fit males from disembarking from any of the ships, allowed the young and the sick to come on. Why don't we do that? What a great message that was.
Because we need someone with the political will. And I just repeat my earlier point. I believe the only person in this current cabinet with the political will to do this is Suella Braverman. So if Rishi Sunak had any sense right now, he would back her, because he feels a little bit queasy about it, but believe me, the British people are with her. Belinda Lucy, Nigel Nelson, Carol Malone, my superstar panel, and they're here all night. Thank you so much. But coming up, I know many of you are supporters of that Australian policy I was just talking about with Carol on illegal migrants. So the man who helped turn back the boats down under, former Australian Foreign Minister Alexander Downer, will join me live at 9:35 to unveil his battle plan for Braverman. But up next in The Clash, should younger generations take more pride in Winston Churchill? For you and I, the answer is probably unwaveringly yes. But a shocking poll reveals that 18 to 24-year-olds think otherwise. So battling it out on this tonight, political firebrand, former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe and the broadcaster Aman Ajmal Masroor. Now, both up next, but I want to know what you think. Dan at gbnews.uk, at gbnews, our poll running there on Twitter, the results and The Clash straight after the break.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
And it's time for The Clash. Now, it seems even winning a world war isn't enough to impress Gen Z, with a shock poll revealing that only a fifth of young Brits view Winston Churchill positively. The survey by the think tank The Policy Exchange found that the majority of the country's 18 to 24-year-olds regard the former PM as little more than a colonial racist whose policies they claim exacerbated the Bengal famine of 1943, in which up to 3 million Indians died. It comes in stark contrast to a BBC poll 20 years ago, which saw the wartime leader voted the greatest Briton of all time, ahead of Princess Diana, Charles Darwin and William Shakespeare. The popularity nosedive has been largely attributed to teachers fixating on the less heroic factors of Churchill's legacy in the classroom. So, what do you think? Should younger generations take more pride in Winston Churchill? Let me know your thoughts by emailing me at dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews, our poll running there too. But to help you make up your mind on this one, if you need it, former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe and the Imam and broadcaster Ajmal Masroor. So, Ajmal, you have a problem with Winston Churchill, even though he saved us from Nazi tyranny.
I do. My families may have perished in India, Bangladesh, because of Winston Churchill's Bengal famine policy. 3 million Bangladeshis or Bengalis died because of that awful racist policy that he pursued. He preferred the crops and all the food stocks to be diverted to the European countries, especially England, instead of feeding the millions who were starving in India under British rule. And it is estimated that 3 million Indians, my ancestors, may have died as a result of that particular awful policy that was very racially motivated. Don't forget, Winston Churchill was a well-known person for giving preference to white Aryan race over the rest. In his pecking order, he even thought various white nations were beneath him. He preferred the Protestant over the Catholics. He preferred the Indians over the blacks. So while he may have been a war hero for Britain and Europe perhaps, he was nonetheless very well known for preaching racism, believing in social Darwinism, as well as directly playing an active role in seeing the death of 3 million Bengalis who died because of that policy.
Ajmal, you've made a lot of claims there. I think Churchill was more than a war hero to the UK and Europe. He was a war hero to the world, because without Churchill, arguably, Nazis would have taken over the entire world with the Japanese. But when it comes to your specific claim, and I want Anne Widdecombe to weigh in on this about the Bengal famine, I'm sorry, you haven't been reading or looking at the same history books as me, because Anne Widdecombe, when it came to the Bengal famine, it's actually far, far more nuanced than what Ajmal is making out. Churchill did have a responsibility to feed the British people and to stop the British people from starving, but he also made efforts in order to get grains to India too.
After the 3 million died.
I'll get Anne to come in here and then you can respond again, Ajmal.
Indeed, but I hope that this conversation isn't going to become fixated on the area that my opponent wants it to be. Because the question was, did the young people admire Churchill? Now, let me say this. If Churchill had not successfully stood up, not only to the Nazis, but to the appeasers in this country, so that we did actually finally declare war on Nazi Germany, if he hadn't actually stood up and then stood firm through defeat after defeat after defeat, if he hadn't actually done all of that, then these young people would be growing up in a country where we had swastikas flying in Whitehall, British Jews in concentration camps, if by this time there would have been any left, and government from Berlin. Now, that is what would have happened if we hadn't had the towering presence of Winston Churchill, not just declaring the war, but keeping Britain's spirits up, as I say, through a whole series of defeats. I mean, there was a time when Churchill himself said, haven't I got one general capable of winning one battle? That's how bad it was. But he was resolute. He knew right from wrong. He knew the sheer evil of Nazism at a time when there were people in Britain even who admired Hitler. He understood it and he fought it.
Indeed, very good points, Anne Widdecombe. And I guess, Ajmal, one thing that I think when I'm listening to Anne there, you know, tough decisions are made at times of war. And obviously it was a tough decision about where resources had to be distributed. But do you understand Anne's point that actually when you look at Churchill on the whole, he is possibly, I believe, our greatest ever Briton?
Yeah.
It's interesting, Dan, when I said my point, you said, I've been reading the wrong books. They were not the same books as you have. And when Anne Widdecombe made her point, you said she made great points. So it quite clearly shows how objective, arbitrary you are in this debate. But let's leave that aside. Let's go back to the facts.
I have my opinion on this, Ajmal. Hey, I hold my hands up, Ajmal. I think Churchill was a great man. I don't think he was perfect, but I think this rewriting of history is disgusting.
Okay, so
and Ajmal, on my show, I'm honest about what I think, okay? So that's what I think.
Dan, I'm glad.
But I'm giving you a say too.
I'm glad you're happy to promote as well as support and champion a racist. Ask the Bengals, people who also Churchill was responsible for, and 3 million died. Forget about Bengal for a second. He did not agree on self-rule of people in Africa, Australia, in the Caribbean, in America, India. He did not like Chinese people. He did not like Arabs. He did not like anybody but the white Aryan race. And that's what you're promoting, Dan. It's very well done by you for championing racism and saying this racist person should also be championed by young people. I'm very happy to see British young people are standing up and saying, hang on a second, our history needs to be evaluated. If somebody was racist, let's call them racist.
No,
let's not glorify racism under any circumstances.
To say that my support of Winston Churchill is championing racism is something that all well-thinking British people will think is absolutely ridiculous. Anne Widdecombe, this was a man who was born in the 1800s. We have to look at history in context, don't we?
Well, indeed. And you used a phrase, you talked about tough decisions. Now, let's remember what Churchill did to the French when the British shelled their fleet at Malzerkabir and sank it with the loss of thousands of French lives. Why did they do that? Because they didn't want the fleet to fall into Nazi hands. Does that mean that Churchill hated the French? They might hate us since then, but does that mean that Churchill hated the French? You do have to take tough decisions. You do have to do things which you know will cause suffering in a war. It's not a gentlemanly disagreement. It's not a playground fight. It's a deadly, serious business.
Why did he call the Chinese? Why did he call the Chinese the great barbaric nation? And why did he claim to be civilized in that particular fight, and he said,
Ajmal,
the Aryan
do you judge Gandhi by all of the racist comments that he made?
So happy
Ajmal, is Gandhi a bad man because he made racist comments against Africans? No.
You know what Churchill said about Gandhi? You know what Churchill said about Gandhi?
Yes, but answer my question. Do you judge Gandhi because of the racist comments that he made?
No, I'm not here to defend or talk about Gandhi. Gandhi was irrelevant to me. I am saying something very simple. You want to glorify Churchill in Britain because you think he was a war hero.
No, I don't want to glorify him. I know he was a war hero. I know he was a war hero. I know he saved us from the Nazis. And Whittaker, final word to you.
The claim to fame for you was that he was a war hero. That's it. Otherwise, he was racist, and he was racist against all men.
Ajmal, I've heard you. I want to give the final word to Anne.
In which there was widespread racism. Gandhi was one of those who made racist comments. If you actually look at the literature of the time, there are hugely casual racist comments everywhere. Yeah. We have developed since then.
Yeah. They were racist, they were sexist, they were homophobic. We don't support that. We've developed as a society. But it's also not a reason... No, not shame on me. Shame on you for doing down Britain, because you're the type of person that wants to delete William Shakespeare. You're the type of person that wants to make sure that every historical figure is damned by judging them on the standards of today. And that's not how history works, and it's not how history should work. But I appreciate the debate. That was the political firebrand, former Tory Minister Anne Whittaker, and the Imam, Ajmal Mazroor. So, who do you agree with? Should younger generations take more pride in Winston Churchill? Andrew on Twitter says, we should indeed be proud of Churchill, founder of the Council of Europe and architect of the European Charter of Human Rights. May we ever be proud to uphold it. From John, why not just tell them the truth and let them decide? Churchill did some despicable things. He also happened to be a good wartime leader, but for goodness sake, he was only a man and often not a good one. And from Michael, they should be taught what the alternative would have been. Then they'd know the true meaning of the word Nazi. They wouldn't throw that word around then. And your verdict is now in. 85% of you agree that younger generations should take more pride in Winston Churchill. 15% of you say they shouldn't. Coming up, as Boris Johnson hits out at critics of green extremism, are our concerns about the economic impact of net zero being swept under the carpet? Our outsider Neil Oliver gives his unfiltered opinion at 9:50. But first, should the UK take inspiration from Australia's no-nonsense tactics that ended their migrant crisis practically overnight? With a man who helped turn back the boats down under, former Australian Foreign Minister Alexander Downer joins me next with the answers Sunak Braverman and millions of concerned Brits have been looking for.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory.
twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Welcome back. Britain is yet to remedy its illegal migrant headache, but my next guest argues we should take a leaf from Australia's book to finally crack the crisis. Under then Prime Minister John Howard, Alexander Downer was Australia's Minister for Foreign Affairs for more than a decade, until 2007, and later the High Commissioner to the UK between 2014 and 2018 under Tony Abbott. Now, the Aussies faced the same crisis of boats arriving illegally on their shores, and Abbott's government boldly ended the crossings in just 2 months after making it a key election pledge. With a no-nonsense approach that turned away boats at sea and sent those who slipped through the net to offshore processing sites, Australia stopped arrivals, quote, stone dead. Criminal gangs finally gave up after realising they were unable to get a single person into the country. So should the UK take inspiration from Australia's hardline tactics that ended their migrant crisis practically overnight? So Alexander Downer, I mean, Australia literally solved this problem within 2 years. Why do you think the UK government at the moment doesn't seem to have the political will to do the same thing?
I don't think it is a question of political will, it's a question of the law. There are two aspects to that. One is that the UK is a member of the signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights, and the trouble with that is that that can be gamed, and it has been gamed, to allow people to stay in the UK who you might otherwise want to deport. And secondly, which I think is quite revealing, the Home Office does appear to be granting asylum to people in a very generous way. So something like 70% of all people who apply for asylum in the UK get asylum granted, whereas in the EU it's only about 35%. So it does point to the fact that the granting of asylum is possibly a little bit too liberal and too generous here. But that, of course, may reflect the Home Office's concern about how the courts might rule. So a lot of this is tied up in the end with the UK's signatory to the European Convention.
Which I believe is a huge problem. And of course, Suella Braverman on this show over the summer made it absolutely clear that she believes we should leave. I know you're not so certain that has to happen.
Well, I think let's see if you can get around it. If, for example, you can make the Rwanda scheme work, which is, I think, in principle, an extremely good scheme, if the government can make that work and they can make that stick legally, and so far every single case that's been heard right up to the Supreme Court, the government has won. So the signs are all good, although more and more cases will be taken, judicial review and so on, all the way to the Supreme Court. These games will be played as they were in Australia, by the way. But as long as the government holds the line, I think they could be confident that the Rwanda solution really will be a very good component of the solution. But if they can enforce that, if they can make that work, and if they can make sure they don't grant asylum too readily to people who apply for it. I mean, for example, the Albanians are obviously, I mean, I can say this, a minister probably wouldn't, but it's obvious they're gaming the system. I mean,
economic migrants.
Your viewers know that if 1 or 2% of the male population of Albania is coming to the UK and they're nearly all under 35 years of age, you can see a game is being played here.
And Albania, a NATO country and a prospective EU member country. What I thought is so interesting about something you say, Alexander, though, is that the right has to be careful in terms of language, because you say what the left tend to do is use some of the more hardline language to deflect from the real issue, because, as you point out, actually stopping the boats is the humane policy.
Yes, well, I think you need to make... There are several issues here. One of them is it's dangerous to make the crossings, and you shouldn't encourage people to take dangerous journeys to the UK. I mean, you know, aeroplanes have to be properly registered, ships have to be properly registered. These boats are not registered. They are. I've looked at the boats myself in Dover. They are incredibly flimsy and they are dangerous, and people have drowned trying to make these journeys. So, in the interests of humanity, you should be stopping it. But also, you have to have a coherent immigration policy. I've been really surprised in the UK by, and I'm a migrant myself, but I have been surprised by how incoherent the immigration policy is. So in Australia, we have a ceiling on the number of migrants, and many countries do, that we take every year, and we decide who comes to our country and the circumstances in which they come. We decide, not people smugglers. Here, people smugglers are deciding who comes to the country. There's no cap on the number of migrants. I mean, I was surprised to learn the other day that over the last 20 years, the British population, the UK's population, has grown by around 9 million. So people need to ask themselves, do we want it to grow by 9 million over the next 20 years?
No, it's not sustainable.
Do you want... so 40,000 people have come illegally across the Channel this year. Well, let's just assume if nothing is done about it, 60,000 will come next year. Is that OK? And 80,000 or 100,000 the year after. People have to think ahead, not just look at this year's figures. And what's the plan for dealing with all of this?
Well, indeed. And can we just finally talk about the pure politics of this? Because, of course, for your party in Australia, it was an election winner, stopping the votes. Now, of course, Abbott and Howard had done the same earlier when you were Foreign Minister, but, of course, you actually did have to stop the votes. But surely Rishi Sunak must realise that perhaps the only way he can even comprehend beating a surging Labour Party at the moment is by stopping the votes. It's hard to see the Conservative Party winning an election, isn't it, if the arrivals in 2023, 2024 number 60, 70, 80...
Well, I would say politically in this country, the government spent £400 billion on COVID. So it's saddled the country. Everybody was happy for the money to be spent, but now it has to be paid for. So you're going to have huge problems dealing with that overhang of debt, as we've seen. So secondly, the government has to do what it has to do, and the public need to understand that with the economy. But secondly, it has to be seen to be able to manage other issues as well. If they can put a stop to this illegal immigration coming into the UK, and Labor opposes the measures, which that's what happened in Australia. You can be sure they will, because they believe in open borders. That could have a devastating political effect on the Labor Party. So they need to think. They need to think that through. Yes, I think this issue could be a real loser for the government if they go for 2 more years and do nothing about it. It could be a substantial electoral winner for them if they can actually stop the boats.
Former Australian Foreign Minister Alexander Downer. Great to have you, Alexander. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Dan.
Now, coming up, should the government entertain paying climate change reparations to less developed countries? A harebrained scheme dreamed up by none other than Red Ed Miliband. My Superstar panel return to debate that, and I'll deliver the first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages after 10. But first, as Boris Johnson lashes out at critics of green extremism, why are the elites at COP so keen to sweep economic concerns about net zero under the carpet? Well, tonight's outsider Neil Oliver is on the way on that straight after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Neil Oliver is tonight's outsider. Now, the gathering of hypocritical elites at COP27, or as critics are calling it, CON27, continued today as world leaders arrived in private jets to double down on their declaration that ordinary people just must face extraordinary pain to help achieve net zero. Former PM Boris Johnson joined that chorus today by accusing folk who dare to oppose the destructive march to net zero of cynical defeatism. Watch.
Spike in oil and gas prices and the consequent global inflation, the hikes in the cost of fertilizer and food have had an impact here. In Egypt, have an impact everywhere. And they have led some of the naysayers to adopt a corrosive cynicism about net zero.
Neil Oliver, isn't it critical that we have a cynicism about a policy which risks driving millions of us here in the UK into poverty?
Yes, Dan. I think I can only imagine that Boris Johnson has his eye on the international speaking circuit, to rake in the millions, because, if you're going to get on that gravy train, there's only one song that you need to sing, and it's all about the green agenda. So he's got his eye on the prize there. I suspect this is an audition for being a kind of an Al Gore 2.0. The corrosive cynicism that's been talked about, it's what they accuse others of is what they themselves are guilty of. As you say, world leaders turning up at Sharm el-Sheikh, in their inevitable jets to lecture the proles about cutting their use of fossil fuels and their output of CO2, and they've come to lecture us about eating less meat while they sit down to menus featuring beef and chicken and salmon and sea bass and cream sauces. This is not leadership that we're seeing now. It's desperation. It's trolling us proles on a galactic scale. Net zero is a fool's game. The International Energy Agency says it will be 2207 before we could be beyond fossil fuels. And the Biden administration concedes that CO2 eradication cannot and will not happen before 2242. That's more than 200 years from now. And in the meantime, the policies that they're preaching are condemning hundreds of millions of the world's poorest to poverty, starvation, death on a global scale. And they're, at the same time, in their cynicism, they're deliberately ensuring that the populations of their own countries are plunged into fuel and food poverty for the first time in generations. This is the reality. Germany, for heaven's sake, the standard bearer of all things green. The Germans are cutting down old growth forests so that they've got firewood, and they're taking down a wind turbine farm so that they can get at the coal underneath so that they can keep some of the lights on. That's happening, and yet these corrosively cynical sock puppet world leaders, whoever's pulling their strings or operating them from within, are continuing to preach this nonsense.
And Neil Oliver, you say that actually there is no climate emergency.
I do. There is no climate crisis. That is my absolute understanding of the data. This is being pushed on us. This is the main point, though. The main point is that even if there was a climate crisis, what's being pushed at us and painted green is not green in the slightest. You might as well call it the greed agenda, because it's just another opportunity for money making by the usual suspects. It's the continued rape of the planet we're supposed to be saving to get access to rare earth metals and rare earth minerals on an unprecedented scale. There's nothing green about it. It's an absolute fallacy. If you were to... This idea that CO2 is a pollutant is pernicious nonsense. It's food for plants. You want the greening of the planet. This idea that it's CO2 that drives the warming of the planet is back to front. It's as though aliens from outer space looked down at Earth and saw a horse-drawn cart and made the assumption that the cart was pushing the horse. Rising CO2 follows global warming. It doesn't cause it.
And Neil, like we've seen with so many of these stories in recent years, and obviously two that we're very passionate about, lockdowns and the vaccine, there is no mainstream political opposition, Neil. we're all just meant to be expected to go along with this without questioning. Both the major, well, actually all of the major political parties just agree with this agenda, and we just have to suck it up. To hell with the consequences.
So much is happening at the moment that it's blurring before our eyes what is actually going on. What we're already taking for granted. We've suddenly and mysteriously got Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor.
How did that
happen? That's the loser in the election contest, followed by one of the most unpopular candidates for anything, are now somehow in charge. And on the other side of the aisle, in the Labour Party, you've just got people who are saying the same thing. In fact, they're in competition with one another to be more and more extreme in the same direction. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, it brings to mind Orwell's Animal Farm, the closing scene thereof, where the animals look in at the window, where the pigs have invited the human farmers to a meeting in the manor farm. And the animals look in and they cannot see where the humans end and the pigs begin, because they've all become the same. They've all become the same. And that's the situation they're in. And the corrosive cynicism is everywhere, Dan. Tonight I watched a clip of Prince William, tin-eared, it barely begins to describe it, after him and his entire royal family uttered not a syllable about the incalculable mental harm that was caused to millions of people, children included, by months and then years of lockdown. And then now he sits down with millionaire footballers to talk about opening up about feelings and mental health in the run-up to the Qatar World Cup, where Beckham and Gary Neville and the rest of the hypocrites are going to go out and trouser millions of pounds from a Qatari government that declares homosexuality is illegal, sentences gay people to imprisonment or death, potentially, where the stadiums were worked to death, 6,000 immigrant workers. And he takes that opportunity to consider talking about feelings. This corrosive cynicism is across the board. And as I say, it's all happening at the same time. And no wonder people are losing track of what is actually going on, because you don't get a chance to take a breath and review the situation. But we are being played for fools, and we are being trolled by the best in the business.
Neil Oliver, such a powerful message. And of course, you will continue it on your show at 6 o'clock Saturday night here on GB News.
Thanks.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight at the Doomsday COP26 Climate Summit, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak pledged more of our cash to the international eco-drive, sparking fears the UK might soon pay climate change reparations, a harebrained scheme proposed by none other than Red Ed Miliband.
Would a Labour government pay reparations to developing countries for climate change?
So this is about global solidarity. I mean, yes, we have some historical responsibility, but this is about global solidarity, and it's absolutely part of our aid commitment.
So, should the government even be entertaining the idea of reparations for countries hit by climate change? I'll poll my superstar panel next. Daily Express columnist Carl Malone, Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson, and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Plus, after Just Stop Oil, bring the M25 to a standstill despite
wish you would direct all that anger and hatred at our government.
So, does more need to be done to stop eco-terrorism? We'll dig into that at 10:30. From pork market humiliation to sex tape smears, was Liz Truss's premiership doomed before it even began? The Spectator's diary editor and writer of a bombshell new book on the downfall of Truss, James Heal, chronicles the shocking inside story of Britain's 50-day Prime Minister. Don't miss that at 10:20. As he cracks down on imposter Twitter accounts launched by lefty losers like Trump-hating comic Kathy Griffin, does Elon Musk need to rise above his deranged critics to prove he's serious about free speech? Mick Hume, he is a free speech champion. He's uncancelled on that at 10:45. Plus, Gary Neville's Qatar hypocrisy is so blatant that even the lefties on one of the BBC's most biased shows couldn't help but stick the boot in.
You know David Beckham, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going, isn't he?
Yeah.
How much has he been paid?
Oh, we'll look at more of those stories going viral in the media buzz coming up. Plus, Is it morally wrong for nurses, up to 300,000 of them, to strike? We'll discuss as I name tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass, so do stay up with us for that before the end of the show. But first, the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Dan. The Prime Minister has said climate security goes hand in hand with energy security, adding the UK is tripling its funding to help nations adapt to the impacts of climate change. Rishi Sunak has been addressing world leaders at the COP27 summit after holding bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron. The two sides have agreed to work on tackling illegal immigration and to collaborate further on the transition to clean energy, including on civil nuclear power.
Climate security goes hand in hand with energy security. Putin's abhorrent war in Ukraine and rising energy prices across the world are not a reason to go slow on climate change. They are a reason to act faster.
The COP27 summit has also been told the world's action on climate change is either a collective solidarity or collective suicide pact. The UN Secretary-General says countries need a clear, financed roadmap to prevent irreversible climate chaos. Antonio Guterres is calling for a universal early warning system within next 5 years and for all governments to impose a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies. A £250 million plan to replace the national flagship Royal Yacht Britannia has been scrapped as part of cuts to government spending. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson championed the scheme when he was in charge, but faced criticism from MPs who feel there are other priorities for military spending. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace told the Commons he's prioritising the procurement of a multi-purpose surveillance vessel over the flagship. A service has been held to mark the opening of the Royal British Legion's Field of Remembrance. The field at the National Memoriam Arboretum in Staffordshire pays tribute to those who have lost their lives in conflict from World War I to the present day. It will be open to the public to pay their respects until the end of the month. And the Prince of Wales has opened up about mental health. In a conversation with footballers Harry Kane and Declan Rice, Prince William said the game has taught him that disappointment is part of life. The trio shared their fondest football memories during a podcast ahead of the World Cup, which begins in under a fortnight.
Thank you, Tatiana. Time for tomorrow's news tonight now on our Media Buzz. First front pages are in. Let's get straight to them. The Metro describes Rishi Sunak as turning on the charm at COP27. After meetings with world leaders for the first time as PM, he also discussed the migrant crisis with Emmanuel Macron. Talks on a deal to tackle the crisis are in the final stages, according to Downing Street. I'm not going to hold my breath. My skin tingles and I sense I am not alone. Then Barbara is right there by my side. Very powerful headline in the Daily Star after brilliant man Scott Mitchell, Dame Barbara Windsor's husband, reveals her spirit joins him in their house. And I'm not surprised he feels that way because they were such a strong couple over so many years. And I still actually can't believe that Babs is not with us. Really, really sad. My superstar panel back with me now. Esteemed Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson, the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda Lucy. Now, Brits haven't been this financially stretched in decades, let's be honest, but Red Ed Miliband sparked outrage yesterday by suggesting we should dig deep to pay reparations to countries who we have somehow subjected to climate change disasters.
Would a Labour government pay reparations to developing countries for climate change?
So this is about global solidarity. I mean, yes, we have some historical responsibility, but this is about global solidarity, and it's absolutely part of our aid commitment. You know, we don't think the government was right to cut the 0.7 aid commitment.
But so you would, just to be clear, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but to be clear, a Labour
absolutely,
government would
it's about supporting poorer countries, completely right.
And China is part of the group of countries that is asking for loss and damage, to use the COP terminology.
We should recognise loss and damage, absolutely.
Including
but
for a country with as much money for China.
It's not about giving money to China. I promise you, Laura, it's not about giving money to China.
I mean, self-loathing for bringing the Industrial Revolution to the world is one thing, But unbelievably, our own Conservative government also appears to be nodding along blindly to this very costly concept. The Daily Telegraph are reporting today that Britain had, quote, opened the door for reparations to developing countries such as the Maldives and Pakistan by backing a last-minute agreement at COP27 to address what they call loss and damage payments. Meanwhile, some eco-extremists are demanding Britain coughs up a staggering £1 trillion to cleanse itself of historic climate sin. Here's what Business Secretary Grant Shapps had to say on the matter when quizzed this morning.
Well, we've always been helping out around the world. I mean, I think the point that's being made is, we industrialised first and without knowing about releasing carbon from fossil will, of course, contributed towards it. I think that's a fair comment.
So both parties, Labour and the Tories, now conspiring to go down this guilt-ridden path of eco-insanity without any buy-in from the British public. Hugely anti-democratic, by the way. And at COP27 today, Sunak brazenly committed to £65 million to green projects in Africa and South America without so much as a heads-up to us back home. But while world leaders jetted into the COP Climate Fest on airliners and private jets, splurging taxpayer cash at a whim on the premise of national guilt, here in the UK, we are facing extreme financial pain thanks to what I believe, Carol Malone, is now a deranged march to net zero.
This winter, when we get blackouts, which we will, people are going to be wondering why they're sitting in the freezing cold with no power when there is power under their feet and we're not using it, we're not getting at it. And we're not getting at it because of these crazy zealots. Miliband was a hopeless prime minister. Why on earth are we listening to him now? These are lunatic policies. We must not apologise for the success of the Industrial Revolution. Our past gave huge technological advantages to almost every country in the world.
Perhaps they should be paying us.
People enjoyed a better standard of living because of us and our Industrial Revolution. In 1800s, it's a useful stat. Average life expectancy was 29. Now it's 71, thanks to the Industrial Revolution and the huge leaps it made. Agricultural things have been made possible. Technological things have been made possible because of our Industrial Revolution. And the very idea we should be paying countries like China and India, countries that are refusing at this moment to lower their carbon emissions. They come to, well, in fact, they're not here this year, but they have come in years gone by, and they've said they will reduce their emissions. They're not, they're increasing them. So, why are we even thinking about a time when
China,
we're in the worst...
bigger than the US and
China's
all
the
of
biggest,
Europe
China's
put
the
together
biggest in
now.
the world.
But no one's thinking of paying China. I mean, China is that?
Why should we be paying anyone?
No, I'm sorry, China have said they want some.
Do you honestly want to open this door to this crazy Miliband theory of reparations?
Well, hang on. First of all, he actually went away from that word reparations. He wasn't talking about that. The trouble with reparations
but in practice it means reparations.
No, it doesn't mean that at all. There is an overarching sort of heading of loss and damage. So it's things like dealing with the Pakistan floods, which would be a direct result of climate change, assuming you believe in climate change. So reparations gives the idea of compensation for something we've done wrong, like a fine.
So
it's not that.
So the floods in Pakistan are our fault?
No, I didn't say that. I said that they were the fault of climate change. Climate change is a global problem, but it does depend on whether you believe that climate change is real.
And who's going to pay? Who's going to pay for it?
Sorry, Nigel. There's a huge difference. We can believe that the climate is changing, and I, as an environmentalist, absolutely believe that we need to try and protect our planet over time. But the deranged march to net zero, and this is what I hate actually about folk on the left, it's almost like it's a binary choice. We either bankrupt ourselves and destroy the lives of working class Brits, or we're climate change deniers. No, no, no. There is a middle ground path.
So hang on, what does that mean? Does that mean that you don't actually think we should try and get it at 1.5 degrees? Does it mean 2 degrees?
Well, no,
does it mean 3 degrees?
As a country, the UK is doing more than any other developed G7 nation to lower our carbon emissions. We are now down to actually about the levels in the 1980s. It's only going one way. I'm proud of what
Can I give you a stat there? You know, we are the second fastest country in the world to cut carbon emissions. We have cut ours from 1999.
But this is a good thing, isn't it?
And I don't feel guilty.
But what I'm saying is, we're doing. It's not like I'm getting sick of these activists saying we're not doing anything. We're doing more than a bit. We've cut our carbon emissions by 44% since 2000.
Well, I would say not one single British person walking the streets of this country should bear any guilt or any responsibility for what's going on around the world. And I'm sorry, you talk about Pakistan and you sit there and say, oh, it's directly linked to climate change. There's no proof of that. Pakistan has been suffering from floods for a long time. Secondly,
30% of the country is underwater.
Yes, but why don't you blame the Pakistani corrupt government for mishandling money, for not investing in flood defences? No, it's all the white British man's fault again. And I'm sorry, but I'm proud of the Industrial Revolution. World, you are welcome. And I'm not having this constant guilt put on our backs because we have helped develop the world. And secondly,
none of these people have the balls, by the way, to talk about China or India and what they're doing.
And also, people keep forgetting the UK, England was once a developing country. We were raped, we were pillaged, we were colonised. The men stayed in this country, the women stayed in this country. We built it up from nothing again to the great country it is. Why can't countries take responsibility for their own finances and their own people and stop blaming England for everything?
Indeed. Now, we know those on the BBC payroll will do anything possible to avoid taking a lefty to task, but Labour pin-up Gary Neville's hypocrisy over the Qatar World Cup is so undeniable that even have I got news for you's resident lefty Ian Hislop had no choice but to stick the boot in during the footballer's guest host stint. Look at this.
Ian, is it coming home?
What, your reputation? The others have been very gentle with you, Gary, but I mean...
Thanks, Ian.
The elephant in the room is still there. I mean, you're commentating there, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm commentating there.
And what's the defence? Football term.
We're commentating there. Well, you've got a choice, I think, haven't you?
What, going or not going?
Well, my view always has been that you either highlight the issues and challenges in these countries and speak about them, or you basically don't say anything, you stay back home and don't go. And I've always said we should challenge them.
There's another option. You stay at home and highlight the abuses. You don't have to go and take the Qataris' money.
Yeah. You can highlight it.
What, during a match?
Well, highlight it during the commentary.
It's the kick-off here in this appalling country's human rights record, and honestly, I think, someone's kicking a ball, but honestly, the amount of immigrant workers who've died, it's a shocker. Oh, it's a goal!
Now, I'm sure Gobby Gary was expecting a hero's welcome on the Lefty Comedy Panel show, but I think we can agree it became something of an own goal. And while it's a nice chance for a lefty to finally show Gary the red card he deserves, don't think BBC bias is all over just yet. That was a rare moment of agreement. Linda DeLucy, Nigel Nelson, Karen Malone, do stand by, because coming up, after Just Stop Oil bring the M25 to a standstill despite police being tipped off to their latest chaotic scheme, does more need to be done to stop eco-terrorism? My Superstar panel return to clash on that, and we'll bring you more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages when the Media Buzz returns at 10:30. But next, was Liz Truss's premiership doomed before it even began? Spectator diary editor and writer of a bombshell new book on Truss's downfall, James Heal, chronicles the shocking inside story of Britain's 50-day Prime Minister. We're back with that in just a few minutes' time.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The biography of Liz Truss has been the most talked about political book of the year, you might say for all the wrong reasons. Even Slippery Stummer used it as a punchline at Truss's final PMQs last month.
A book is being written about the Prime Minister's time in office. Apparently it's going to be out by Christmas. Is that the release date or the title?
Well, of course, it was actually a lot sooner than Christmas. So out of the blue, the inside story of the unexpected rise and rapid fall of Liz Truss quickly changed from political biography to political obituary as the Truss premiership blew up at extraordinary speed. But despite the book's hastily rewritten ending, it's still packed full of fascinating insider revelations about Britain's shortest Prime Minister's doomed stint in number 10. And I'm joined now by the book's co-author, diary editor at The Spectator, James Heal. So, James, one of the most telling revelations in this book was that Truss sobbed as she sacked her longtime ally and friend, really, although we'll come to that in just a moment, Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor. And it's so fascinating, James, because take me inside that moment, because here is this woman who has got the job that she always dreamed of. She has to stab her best mate in the back, and probably by that point, she still knows it's not going to save her.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng entered Parliament on the same day together in 2010. They'd spent the best part of 10 years plotting and scheming and thinking together. They formed a backbench group of MPs together. During lockdown, they went on walks together in Greenwich Park, discussing all of this. And finally, they get into number 10. She puts him into number 11 as Chancellor, and they work on this mini budget together. There's lots of questions now about who's to blame, who's not to blame. But the point is they were working hand in glove together. And unfortunately, the mini budget just lands disastrously. It takes them too long to realise that. And it ends with her feeling like she has to sacrifice him, and him turning to her and say, you do realise, you know, after me, they're going to come for you next. And she has Kwasi, they're already coming for me. And that really was the end of 12 years of friendship and close alliance together. and just shows the brutal nature of the top of British politics.
No, indeed, it does. James, you also revealed that during the leadership campaign, which obviously took place over the summer, there was actually lots of speculation flying around. I had heard it about Truss's personal life. There was a dirty dossier, you say, prepared by her political enemies. And that reportedly included, as you mentioned in the book, allegations of an affair with Kwarteng, which was a long-standing Westminster rumour, but they both strenuously deny it, James. Sunak apparently didn't want to use any of this stuff as part of his campaign. But what can you tell us? Because I have to be honest, James, and you know I supported Truss during the leadership campaign. I feel like they were out to get this woman from the start with a lot of unfounded speculation about her personal life.
Yeah, I think it's to Sunak's credit, from what we can ascertain, was that although some people who were supporting him or purporting to support him at the time, that he never himself had any personal truck with this, but there were MPs supporting him who wanted to make political capital out of this. I think, look, I mean, Liz Truss is someone who's got the skin of a rhino when it comes to this kind of thing, and she's put up with a lot over the years. But we felt like there was important points to address in some of the speculation, and reached a certain point where it was important to contextualise what was going on. But as you say, I think that the point is, all these people would often come up with this stuff, supporters of one candidate or another, or a rival candidate, and they'd say, well, why haven't this been run, etc. Well, there's probably a good reason for that, was that none of this stuff was true. And so over the years you hear this various kind of stuff, but that's the reason why it remained in a dodgy dossier rather than being printed anywhere, was because, frankly, no one could find the supportive evidence to go forward with these theories.
James, you say she has the skin of a rhino, but whatever you think of her politically, what Liz Truss has just been put through on a human level is absolutely devastating. It's something that she might never get over. Now, she agreed to meet with you in the course of your preparation of the book. What was her state of mind? How do you think she was coping psychologically with the incoming?
So we met her twice during the book, one of which was before she became Prime Minister. The other was when it was shortly, it was just at the beginning of her premiership, so really before it all started to go wrong. But I think, she was someone who knew her own mind, who'd come off a summer where she had, I think, continually been underestimated in Westminster from a lot of people outside her own party. And so she'd won. And so I think she felt somewhat vindicated, confident. And I think the danger, perhaps in retrospect, was that she was a little too confident over what she did. But she was very sure of her own mind. And I think she probably felt that her instincts had been vindicated. She was part of that 2010 intake, an intake of lots of future, I think it was about 24 future cabinet ministers who sat around that table who entered on Parliament on that same day. And she'd beaten them all. She'd beaten the likes of Sajid Javid, beaten the likes of Gavin Williamson. So when we spoke to her, she was very confident and relaxed and knew her own mind. We were going to have a subsequent third interview, but subsequently that fell through because of everything that just happened to go wrong. And obviously the book ended up being, a little bit ending on a different note than perhaps we might have originally intended. When I flew through her...
What she didn't maybe factor in was how much some of those men who you just mentioned were such sore losers, were never going to do what was right for the country, and were never going to do actually what was right for the Conservative Party and get behind her, James, because they were stabbing her in the back from the moment she entered number 10.
Well, this is the point. One of the points you make at the end of the book is, look, however it had gone, there were people who felt very bitterly about that. And I think the Tory party right now is a party after 12 years, Brexit, COVID, all the different factions, where some of these people they're just not willing to work with whoever is leader. I would say there's the dispossessed and never possessed. I think you've got about sort of 60 ex-ministers sitting at any one time on the backbenches, etc. So I think it would be very difficult for a politician of the highest calibre to try and get that all together. And I'm interested to see how Rishi Sunak will deal with that. Obviously, we've got the 17th of November, the statement coming up, but I question whether any politician, even of the highest calibre, can keep the people together. And I think Liz Truss was never someone afraid to shake things up. And unfortunately for her, she just had too many enemies at one point, and that's what led to her downfall.
Now, of course, James, we can't finish without getting the story behind Liz Truss's infamous pork market speech at the Conservative Party conference in 2014. So she was Environment Secretary at the time. Let's just remind ourselves of her greatest hits that day.
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace. In December, I'll be in Beijing, opening up new pork markets. And I will not rest until the British apple is back at the top of the tree.
Oh, but Joseph, there is a deliberately untold truth behind that speech, isn't there, which you reveal in the book?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I mean, first of all, let's just say, I mean, obviously it's funny, we're watching it now. You were just playing Have I Got News For You, and that's what made her famous. This whole thing went viral, but she can laugh at it, which is something quite refreshing. I mean, we all know about pompous politicians. You know, Liz Truss's own daughters play it to her as a meme, and she's laughed at it in meetings. And I think that's some of the personal side, which I think people didn't often get to see, partly because the premiership was so short. But yeah, I mean, completely, she was someone who was a product at the time. She was a bit uncertain. She was only, I think, 38 at the time, 39 at the time when she was in the cabinet, and she was sort of over-prepared in terms of this CCHQ trading, and obviously she had a serious meeting, but obviously it came across on television very different to the whole. At the time, it got good write-ups, but as you can see in retrospect, you know, it became something of one of the early political memes, and even 8 years on, it's something we all still chuckle about.
Well, look, it's a fascinating book, a very small chapter in British politics, but worth telling all the same. James Hill, author of Out of the Blue, the inside story of the unexpected rise and rapid fall of Liz Truss. That rapid fall part was added, as you can imagine, in the final weeks of her premiership. Now, coming up, as he cracks down on imposter accounts launched by deranged critics, how should Elon Musk go about restoring free speech to Twitter without letting the left win? Mick Hume, a real champion of free speech, uncancelled on that at 10:45. But next, after Just Stop Oil brought the M25 to a standstill, despite police being tipped off to their latest chaotic scheme, what more needs to be done to free us from green tyranny? Back with that straight after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. Lots more front pages are in. Lots of climate hysteria. They seem to love this. The Guardian leads on warnings from COP27 that 1 billion refugees will be created by 2050, according to the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. Meanwhile, a senior civil servant has claimed Government Minister Gavin Williamson told her to, quote, slit your throat during a campaign of bullying when he was Defence Secretary. Williams denies he bullied the civil servant, but the publication notes he is not denying the specific words. Do you know what? Does anyone care? I mean, politicians speak terribly to each other. I really can't get excited about now the Westminster media mob trying to bring down Williamson just like they did with Braverman, unsuccessfully. Rishi vows I will get a grip on migrant crisis in the Express as talks for a deal with France enter the final stages. The Eye, dystopian front page here, as the UN Secretary-General comments at COP27 today that we are on a highway to climate hell. Red alert for Earth, they said. What positive news. Just what planet are they on? Asked the Daily Mail as UK charity War on Want demands the UK pay £1 trillion in climate change reparations following calls by Ed Miliband. And finally, to The Sun, I didn't want to get out of here, said Love Island star Olivia Atwood following her surprise exit from I'm a Celebrity on medical grounds on just day 2 of the current series. Why on earth would you be watching that show? I just do not know. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, Sunday Mirror political editor Nigel Nelson and former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Another day, another outrageous display by the eco-terrorists of Just Stop Oil, who this time caused rush hour chaos by scaling the gantries of the M25 and organised protests. I don't call these protests, by the way, though. I call this criminal activity, ranging from Dartford to St Albans. Among them, women I'm very worried about, actually, 24-year-old Louise Harries, who posted this dispatch that somehow managed to be hysterical and emotionless at the same time. Let's see her try and blame climate change for the drought in her tear ducts, if you know what I mean. Look.
Hello, my name is Louise. I'm 24 years old, and I'm here. I'm here because I don't have a future. And you might hate me for doing this, and you're entitled to hate me. But I wish you would direct all that anger and hatred at our government. They are betraying young people like me.
Nope, I'm going to direct it all at you, actually, tonight. 23 people arrested over the protest on suspicion of conspiracy to cause public nuisance, a new charge that carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in jail. Among those apprehended today were 4 suspected organisers caught in the morning raids. 3 additional arrests had been made on Sunday as part of a, quote, proactive policing effort. Just Stop Oil's alleged mastermind, Roger Hallam, was among those flanked by officers following the receipt of intelligence about plans for public disruption. But the significant operation not only failed to thwart today's chaos, Just Stop Oil have warned motorists to avoid the M25 and associated roads from 7 a.m. tomorrow as they plan to continue their protests in the coming days. So I'm sorry, Belinda de Lucy, this ain't working, number one. And number 2, these are not protests. This is eco-terrorism. Go and look at the Terrorism Act of the year 2000 and everything these narcissistic fools are doing equates to terrorism.
Well, I think actually even more worrying at the moment is
You've got teenagers now with the same levels of anxiety as psychiatric patients had in the 1950s. In-depth and highly respected reports have been done time and time again. And what we're doing to our young is shredding their nerves, making them fragile and panicked in this constant state of fear. And you saw from your footage just now how this young girl is literally unravelling with no care in the world that her career might be over, go to prison, she might fall from the bridge. And the scary thing is people are being taught everyone's going to die, so if a few people die along the way, you're saving billions anyway. So someone's going to get hurt, either the protesters who've been brainwashed,
right?
Utterly and totally, and it is a form of abuse. I'm sorry, but we need to call it out. These Armageddon cults are abusing our children. They are informing them such ridiculous, catastrophic images of what is going to happen to the planet if they don't climb a bridge. You saw her. It's not just her. The girl who poured feces over Captain Moore's memorial. All these young people, they're being their mental well-being.
Well, she was on the show. She was on the show,
nuts.
and I was deeply worried for her. But it's also these newspapers, you know, it's these newspapers like The Eye and The Guardian, Carol Malone, that are spreading this terror.
Completely. But also remember, this is actually starting in schools as well.
It is.
Kids are being taught this rubbish in schools. That girl there needs help. You know, she's got more chance of having no future by falling off that bridge than she has with the planet. But, you know, the trouble is, I think activists in this country now know they can do whatever the hell they like. They can see that authority in this country is just collapsing. They see the government, the police, all the institutions that are responsible for authority. They're just too squeamish about their responsibilities to take them on. So they know that whatever they do, those people who are arrested today will maybe be in a cell for overnight, but then they'll be sent to court, they'll get a smack on the wrist, they'll be free again. So there are no consequences.
Well, we've seen that with the justice system, Nigel Nelson, because I believe you don't think there needs to be any stronger laws on this. But you look at our justice system, Nigel, they are woke and they are soft on eco-terrorists. Because they agree with
Sorry, let's get the language right. These people are not terrorists. They may turn into them, but they're not terrorists yet.
Go and have a look at the definition of...
I did. The Terrorism Act does not cover what they're doing. That you have to actually use explosives, firearms, or serious violence to pursue an ideological goal. They're not using serious violence and obviously not firearms.
That's not true, because of cyber terrorism and things like that. I mean, you don't have to use violence to kill people. But also, these people are putting lives at risk.
But also, it's civil disobedience on a grand scale with a potential for people to die. Those kids could die.
Yeah, Belinda is absolutely right. It's a cult.
Yes, and do we think Roger Hallam, you know, he's getting all these vulnerable, impressionable kids to do his dirty work. He wasn't up there on the gantry today. They were. And he doesn't care if those kids die, because he's already said
these
if people die in the back of ambulances because of his protest, he doesn't give a stop. So he won't care about
when it comes to the penalties, they've just been increased. So Louise can face 6 months in jail.
She won't get it, though.
Well, I mean, this is down to the judges. This is down to the judges to actually do it.
The girl last week that was on this show who looked like a zombie, I have to be said, she was trotting out nonsense. She had been arrested 3 times, 4th time in court. The judge said he wouldn't jail her because of her age. She was 21. I'm sorry.
And I just want to push back with you on the 2000 Terrorism Act, Nigel, because...
Could you look it up?
Yes,
well, no, because I've written about this a lot in the past. Because terrorism means the use of or threat of action where the use or threat is designed to influence the government, and the use or threat is made for the purpose of advancing a political or ideological cause.
Or religious cause.
Action falls within this subsection if it involves serious damage to property. Yes. Endangers a personal life, yes. Creates a serious risk to the health or safety of the public or a section of the public, yes. Or is designed seriously to interfere with or seriously to disrupt an electronic system. How can you tell me
and the next paragraph will say that it's the use of firearms and explosives is the next paragraph of the act you're reading at the moment. That's what constitutes terrorism. So if you use extreme violence, a knife or something like that, that would actually count. All I'm saying is that these people are not terrorists. They're jackasses. They're disruptors.
Someone is going to get hurt. There is going to be someone severely injured or death.
People have already
through
died.
this, and that will be
Ambulances have already
risk
been
to life.
held up
It
with
is
stroke
frightening.
victims in those
We've invited this kind of behaviour because we've indulged it. You know, a lot of these, these tantrum-throwing trust fund babes, they think it's OK to chuck a can of soup over at Van Gogh sunflowers, a painting that's worth
No, it's not okay.
prices, 75 quid. But, they think they can do it because nothing happens to them.
It's entitlement.
But they get nothing happens to them.
And the point that I'm making, Nigel, is that, I'm someone who absolutely is a free speech fundamentalist, and I absolutely believe in the right to protest. And that's why I have to say there is a serious distinction. This is not protest. This is criminal activity.
I agree entirely.
I believe it is eco-terrorism, and that is why.
That's where you have to stop. That's where you stop. It is criminal.
That is why these people need to be treated differently. That is why the law needs to be toughened up.
But toughened up to what? I mean, you've got to have a proportionality about it.
No, you don't. These folk need to go to jail.
But
for how long?
A year. And the law says they can. The law says 51 weeks for blocking a public highway, you can get a max of. But the trouble is, there's no cells to put them in. We don't have enough cells to put those kids in jail.
Or police to
But it's like the Rwanda scheme. There have to be some folk who are made an example of here, because then the rest of the eco-terrorists will realise they can't.
But it should be the adults and not the children that they're farming out to take all the responsibility and risk their lives for. It needs to be the ringleaders.
3 days in a jail cell is a badge of honour. 4 months in a jail cell, they're not going to like that very much.
Exactly.
Now, look, we're less than 24 hours away from the US midterm elections, which will prove critical for Trump and Biden. And on Whoopi Goldberg's Liberal talk show The View, the rhetoric just gets nastier and nastier. Host Sunny Hostin exposed her racial intolerance with this disparaging description of white suburban women. Watch.
I read a poll just yesterday that white Republican suburban women are now going to vote Republican.
Why?
It's almost like roaches voting for Raid, right?
I think they're voting for the voter.
They're voting against their own self-interest. Do they want to live in Gilead?
Okay,
do we love it in the hands?
Do we love democracy?
I mean, absolutely divisive stuff. And of course, Belinda Lucy, it's these suburban white women who are likely to give Biden a humbling.
I am so shocked. I hadn't seen that clip. If anyone had called either the black or Jewish or any other minority croaches, this is what the language Hitler used to try and dehumanise people. These critical race theories, these BLM people are trying to dehumanise white people so we're easy targets, so no one gets... It's almost sanctioning violence and hatred towards white people. I can't believe she wasn't pulled off the stage and thrown into jail for that.
What Belinda said. She's absolutely right.
Really what Belinda said.
But this is the divisive language going on in the US, and that is why I actually believe we might see a very monumental election in America over the next 48 hours because people are turning against this nonsense. I will introduce Nigel Nelson and Karen Malone. Do stand by, because coming up, are nurses morally wrong to strike? We'll debate that as we crown tonight's greatest Britain and union jackass. But first, does Elon Musk need to rise above deranged critics like Trump-hating Kathy Griffin to prove he's serious about free speech? We'll make you. He is a certified free speech champion. He's uncancelled right after we take a very quick look, just a few seconds, at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as membership of Reform UK explodes, is a political revolution imminent? Party leader Richard Tice explains why former Tory members are fleeing the party in their droves. Plus, as America goes to the polls, is the Trump comeback on, and could this be the beginning of the end for Biden? Esteemed US journalist Megyn Kelly breaks down this crunch vote on the future of America, and there's opinion galore from Nigel Farage, Tonya Buxton, and my superstar panel, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Patel, conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media and social media too. Now, Elon Musk's first week as Twitter boss since his £40 billion takeover has got off to one hell of a rocky start. Like millions of others, I applaud his drive to uphold free speech on the platform and ultimately rid the site of biased wokery. But the world's richest man arguably gave his critics a haul of ammunition over the weekend by banning Twitter accounts that impersonated him. They included one of the world's most notorious Donald Trump haters, Kathy Griffin, who caused uproar by holding up an effigy of the president's severed head in a controversial 2017 stunt. In her latest misdemeanor, Griffin changed her Twitter profile name and picture to mimic and mock Musk, later earning a permanent ban for her efforts for breaking strict impersonation rules. Now, Musk swatted away claims he was purging his critics by banning them, instead reinforcing his commitment to free speech by declaring this extends to not even banning the account following my private jet, even though this is a direct personal safety risk. And I'm joined now by free speech campaigner Mick Hume, who fears Musk now risks giving his left-wing naysayers the chance, I guess, to say they were right all along. Because, Mick, what's so interesting about this, of course, is that, yeah, there might be a really good reason for Musk to say we're going to ban all impersonation sites on Twitter. But it's hard to look at this, and I say this as someone who is a massive supporter of what Musk is trying to do with Twitter. It's hard to look at this and think he's doing this for any other reason other than banning Kathy Griffin, who's been impersonating him directly. And, of course, that's the opposite of what he says he wants Twitter to become.
Exactly, Dan. Yeah, I mean, we need to judge people by what they do, not what they say about themselves. So we're looking to him to stand up and be the free speech absolutist that he claims he is. If you start banning people from Twitter, then, you know, you're just giving ammunition to the cancel culture wokists. I mean, he's in such a strong position. These people only complain about cancel culture when they are the ones who get cancelled. They don't care about the cancelling of Donald Trump, who was the president of the United States when he was cancelled on Twitter. They don't care about the cancelling of gender-critical feminists who are victimised by and witch-hunted by the trans lobby. They're silent about those things, but as soon as they get cancelled, then they're on their high horses. And he's kind of given them a bit of an easy target to come back and say, well, you know, you're as bad as us, you're a censor. Where when he came in and said, you know, the bird has been freed when he took over Twitter, that gave us all a big lift. And the best thing about it was that it absolutely brought out the fear and loathing that the woke left Twitterati have of free speech. Leading American commentators actually saying, if he allows there to be free speech on Twitter, the fascists will take over. You know, really exposing themselves that free speech equals fascism. Completely putting himself in a very strong position to do them down. And now he's kind of making it easy for them to come back and say, well, you know, there you are. You can't believe a word he says. So I think it would be much better if he would put his money where his mouth is, or maybe put his mouth where his money is, and stand up for the free speech absolutism that you and me would like to see in public life.
No, I completely agree. And the thing is, if he's worried about the impersonations, for example, because this seems to be the particular issue that is kicked off, then say to someone like Kathy Griffin, OK, you need to stop impersonating someone else, but once you do that, then you can return to the platform, whereas instead he seems to have moved towards this lifetime ban, which is, of course, exactly what he did, exactly what the former regime did to Donald Trump, and that caused all of the issue in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, you know, let these idiots have a joke. If they think that's funny, let them get on with it. I mean, my view on free speech is always better out than in. Let these people expose them. Let the idiot Louise expose herself for what she is. You know, let these people because you're not going to defeat any of these people by censoring them. You're just allowing them to be martyrs and allowing them to occupy the moral high ground. We need to have the argument out, expose them for what they are, and say that we are the people who are on the side of free speech. And that way, I think we at least have a chance of reaching truth in our society and some agreement about that.
Exactly, because so much of what Elon Musk is doing is brilliant. You know, he says that he wants Twitter to become by far the most accurate source of information about the world. That's his mission. And he has actually responded directly to mainstream media journalists who are very concerned that their sort of prominence on Twitter might be reduced. And he's making the point, and I think it's a very fair point, that actually the mainstream media has proven over the past couple of years that they don't have a monopoly on truth and facts.
No, they're the journalists that hate Trump, when they, that hate Musk, when they talk about, his plan for free speech on Twitter will be a festival of hate speech, by which they mean opinions that they disagree with, and misinformation, by which they mean information that they do not want us to hear and judge for ourselves. They want it to go through their fact-checking process before we're allowed to judge. So I think that's all a good thing. The problem is, you know, we've lived in a society now for the last few years, worse and worse, where our free speech is increasingly controlled by the big tech billionaires of Silicon Valley. And now we've got Trump, who's rocking the boat, a disruptor, really upsetting them, despite the fact that this brilliant man sees him capable of doing a tweet of his own that's intelligent. Nevertheless, he's kind of upsetting them in a great way. But we have to accept that in the end, you know, having one good billionaire, if that's what he is, controlling free speech is not the answer either. What we need him to do is to open up the platform, let the bird free, and give us a chance of winning the argument, because we're in a culture war for free speech. And the problem is that every discussion of free speech now begins with the assumption that there's too much of it. We need to turn that on its head and say, nowhere in the world is there enough free speech, because it's our most fundamental liberty on which all of us depend.
Couldn't agree more. The light's just gone out on you there, Mick Hume, but hopefully the light hasn't gone out on free speech. And look, I think you're raising fair points about Elon Musk, but I still am going to support him overall in his aim, because I think it's a good thing. But you're right, he's got to be sensible with what he does. Free speech.
We'll give him a chance.
Yeah, exactly. No, indeed. Indeed. Mick Hume, the light's back on. Thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. And my superstar panel return to do just that. Carol Malone, who is your nominee for today's greatest Britain?
OK, never thought I'd be naming SNP backbenchers as my greatest Brit, but this is for 1 week only, especially the ones who forced the biggest ever rebellion against Nicola Sturgeon and her appalling gender reforms, which she was pushing through. A lot of them had the whip taken away. They were calling for her to water down the laws which allows someone to change their gender at the age of 16 and get a gender recognition certificate after just 3 months. This would have, a lot of them were saying this would have left the door open for, for people to misuse this, for women's safe spaces to be invaded. So this is fantastic. And Sturgeon, bless her, has caved. She was so strong on these laws, but because her own future now looks like it's in doubt, it looks like she's going to water them down. Thank God for the young people of Scotland.
Nigel Nelson, your nominee.
Yep, mine are Greatest Britons, which is the 300,000 nurses who are telling the government enough is enough and are finally standing up for themselves.
So did you mean not Union jackass? That's not Union jackass?
My Union jackass?
No, but I mean, surely it's the nurses.
That should be.
So would you feel that way, Nigel, if one of your family members' lives were put on risk as a result of that decision?
Well, they shouldn't be, because there'll still be emergency care and critical care.
Okay.
So
but not cancer operations. Anyway, we'll debate this properly tomorrow night, I think. Belinda de Lucy, your nominee?
Mine is an honorary Brit this week. It is the fabulous new and fresh Prime Minister of Italy, Meloni, who has said she was going to do something about the migrant crisis, and would you believe it? Just did it. She stopped single, fit young males disembarking from migrant ships carrying illegal migrants, and really showed up our wet wipe of spineless, jelly-belly government for not doing
great. Well, look, I'm going to go with Carol Malone for that, because I don't usually support the SNP, but actually this is a very good thing. Yeah. Carol Malone, very quickly, your Union jackass.
Miliband, who has done more damage to this country's economy than the Tories ever will.
Nigel Nelson, your nominee?
Yeah, crocodile tears, Louise, for recklessly standing on a gantry to stop the M25.
And Belinda.
Yes, jackass, definitely. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who went on about, climate weight. What did he say? It was we were on the highway to climate hell. That was it, triggering all the mental health issues we have with
which the lefty papers have lapped up. But no, I'm going with Nigel and Louise from Just Stop Oil, who needs help, and she also needs to be locked up. Nigel Nelson, Carol Malone, Belinda de Lucy, my fabulous superstar panel. I'm back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Headliners is next. Good night.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has said climate security goes hand in hand with energy security, adding the UK's tripling its funding to help nations adapt to the impacts of climate change. Rishi Sunak has been addressing world leaders at the COP27 summit after holding bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron. The two sides have agreed to work on tackling illegal immigration and to collaborate further on the transition to clean energy, including on civil nuclear power.
Climate security goes hand in hand with energy security. Putin's abhorrent war in Ukraine and rising energy prices across the world are not a reason to go slow on climate change. They are a reason to act faster.
The COP27 summit has also been told the world's action on climate change is either a collective solidarity or collective suicide pact. The UN Secretary-General says countries need a clear, financed roadmap to prevent irreversible climate chaos. Antonio Guterres is calling for a universal early warning system within the next 5 years and for all governments to impose a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies. A £250 million plan to replace the national flagship, Royal Yacht Britannia, has been scrapped as part of cuts to government spending. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson championed the scheme when he was in charge, but faced criticism from MPs who feel there are other priorities for military spending. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace told the Commons he's prioritising the procurement of a multi-purpose surveillance vessel over the flagship. A service has been held to mark the opening of the Royal British Legion's Field of Remembrance. The field at the National Memoriam Arboretum in Staffordshire pays tribute to those who have lost their lives in conflict from World War I to the present day. It will be open to the public to pay their respects until the end of the month. And the Queen Consort's new cipher has been revealed. The ornate monogram for Camilla will feature on her personal letterheads, cards and gifts, as opposed to the King's cipher, which will be seen on government buildings and postboxes. Camilla's cipher is expected to be shown in public for the very first time this Thursday, when it's featured on the cross she'll lay at Westminster Abbey's Field of Remembrance. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's over to headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I am your host, Simon Evans, just adjusting my glasses as I see that they're perched on a slightly odd angle. Tonight I am joined by the two brilliant comedians, Josh Howie and Leo Kearse. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
Yeah, now I see it like that, Josh, you're right. It's a little bit of character, doesn't it? Yeah. There's an awful lot of prejudice against us with our asymmetrical ears.
I know.
There's some sort of genetic load that had to, you know...
Well, maybe if you could be like me and just have eyes that work.
Yeah. At your age, you're fine. You wait.
I'm 27.
Well, you shouldn't take such stringent measures to conceal your age through other means. Let's take a look at Tuesday's front pages. We start with the Daily Mail, and they have just what planet are they on? Now campaigners say UK should pay £1 trillion in climate change reparations to poorer nations. That is a War on Want is the charity to whom you should no longer be taking your old clothes. The Telegraph leads with gas deal set to ease energy crisis, and two adorable little munchkins there having a little hug at the climate change conference. The Eye leads red alert for Earth, gravest warning yet on climate change. At some point, these climate change warnings will have to ease off, but they seem to be racking them up at the moment. The Guardian leads with poor nations paying twice for climate breakdown, and failure to tackle crisis will create 1 billion refugees by 2050, Summit warned. Also, slit your throat, aid in New Williamson claims. These are the text messages which he is accused of bullying, whips and so on. The Times has welfare and pensions set to rise with inflation. Sunak preparing for 11 billion pledge in budget, and British will help French migrant patrols. And there is the little love story that we referred to earlier as well. Interesting sort of creation of a crucifix between their two faces there with the teeth. Anyway, the Express reads PM optimistic as talks with French to stop Channel boats enter final stages. Rishi says, I will get a grip on migrant crisis. He may be the first Prime Minister to actually fulfil on those promises in many decades. And we finish with the Star. Babs' hubby reveals her spirit visits him. My skin tingles and I sense I am not alone. Then Barbara is right there by my side.
Sounds like shingles.
It might be, yes. Is it spirits or is it just a skin disease? Well, is she dead? I'm not sure we're going to be doing that one. She is dead, otherwise she actually would be. That wouldn't be a story, I don't think.
Is it a story, though?
We'll find out. Anyway, those are the front pages. Let's take a look inside. So we start with the front page of the Telegraph, Leo, although it's pretty much universal.
Yeah, so Rishi Sunak has struck a deal, or is to strike a gas deal with the US to ease the energy crisis. It might not be in place for this winter, but by spring, the UK hope that they'll be getting 10 billion cubic metres of gas. Cubic meters, right. Yeah. I don't know if that's it sounds like a lot. I'm guessing
you said
it's a lot.
pubic meters for me, but I don't know why that was that.
No,
comes to mind.
That's what Americans call it. You don't want to be burning that. It smells awful. So
that's where they're going to install the new smart meters, so they can be constantly aware.
I guess you could harvest gas from around the back as well.
Yes, you could. A little tingling, Barbara Windsor style. Anyway, yes.
But yeah, so the UK will be getting 10 billion cubic metres, and the whole of the European Union will be getting 15 billion cubic metres from the US. This is liquefied natural gas. Yeah. This is to replace, to try and move away from dependency on Russian gas, which comes through pipelines. So we're using a lot of liquefied natural gas, and we've got we've been building terminals in Germany and other places in Western Europe to deal with it. So this would help allay some of the fears around our energy supply, because the National Grid has warned of blackouts this winter.
But it won't arrive in time for this winter, you don't think?
It won't arrive in time for this winter, but it does mean that perhaps we won't need to worry about burning through the gas that we've got stored. So our storage is pretty much at full capacity at the moment. And, if we do have a cold December, we maybe won't need to worry so much. I think we've got 7 weeks of gas. If we don't get any new supplies, we've got 7 weeks of gas, so we could just, burn that and not worry too much.
If they hadn't disincentivised the capacity the British might have had to put on an extra sweater and just tough it out, oh, it's all free.
Yeah, instead they're so worried about people being in uproar about gas rationing or gas prices or whatever. They're almost encouraging us. They're subsidising us to burn more. But to be fair, the price of gas on the market has come down substantially since August, since it peaked. So we're not in the dire straits that we were.
And what would you say? I throw this open to you as well, Josh. What would you say to anyone who might suspect that this is exactly what America always wanted to happen, and why they weren't in any great hurry to stop the war?
It's interesting here, someone from the government said that this has hailed this as a goodwill gesture from the US to the UK. And it's like, yes, us spending billions of pounds. that's like me going to McDonald's and then buying a Big Mac and then selling it to me as a goodwill gesture. Thank you.
A vast new market has opened up.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's equivalent to Lend-Lease, isn't it? It's on that sort of scale,
Yeah, it's a huge amount of money.
But they do need the gas themselves to, gas is incredibly powerful and incredibly needed in economies it powers so much economic activity. It's not just for generating electricity and, fertiliser production and stuff like that. Yeah. So by selling it to us, they're actually, raising the price when they could, keep it themselves.
And of course, school chemistry lessons as well. Nothing without a Bunsen burner. So those will be carried on.
But it's interesting that they're calling it. They're not just. They're trying to sort of frame it in a larger energy security partnership or initiative. Yeah. And they're also going on about how it's going to improve energy efficiency, and they want to drive down consumption and invest in future renewable technologies. But really, you sense that that's just all lip service because they're all at COP27, rather than saying, now we're just going to buy loads of fossil fuels, basically.
I mean, you do wonder, they all go to COP27 as in Egypt. I think we might be covering it again a bit later, but they have all their podium speeches, of course, in which they the rhetoric comes out. But I assume that a lot of the backroom deals are maybe slightly at odds with the grandstanding rhetoric about saving the planet.
I mean, a lot of the deals, his meeting with Macron and the sort of the strategy they're working out around border control and fossil fuels, is very not, sort of PC Green Party woke stuff.
Well, let's see if we come back to that over the course of the evening. The Guardian now, Josh. I did consider sending you a text about this one, but it's best we thrash it out face to face.
I know, after I reported you to HR last time, after your 3 a.m. I've rewatched it.
Hooray!
So Rishi Sunak refuses to sack Gavin Williamson over abusive texts. He's put out a slightly contradictory statement here where he says, the spokesperson for Prime Minister has put out saying, Sunak has zero tolerance approach to bullying, but then, of course, he's refused to sack Williamson for bullying. So,
do you think it's bullying? I've finally managed to find the text, which not really people talk about.
They're not nice.
They're not nice.
They're pretty. There's definitely threatening.
It feels more like he feels is being misused.
Mistreated because he wasn't invited or whatever.
Yeah,
and he's like, there's a price to be paid and this and that and swearing. And I mean, the incredible thing is, it seems like this isn't the first time, but also the fact that he... just who writes this stuff down? That's the thing that amazes me in today's day and age.
Like he doesn't know that screenshots exist.
I mean, we teach our kids, always assume anything you write will sooner or later come out. You know, you've got to be prepared for that. I mean, an MP, absolutely ludicrously naive.
And some people have said, well, they're both whips, or they're both former whips, so this is how they talk. You know, it's like the guy in the thick of it. But it was very one-sided. I just think it shows that Gavin Williamson isn't coping well with No Nut November.
Or maybe Movember as well.